3. Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka.
Hello, Jerry.
Hello, Bill. Today is May 4th, 2022. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Bill Cliett. I know I'm murdering your last name. How do you pronounce your last name?
Cliett.
Cliett. Thank you. Bill Cliett. Where are you calling in from, Bill?
Palm Coast, Florida.
Palm
Coast, Florida. It's halfway between Daytona Beach and St. Augustine.
Well, it's really fun to have you. And the first question is, what's the best thing for a human being?
To live, I suppose. Otherwise, you're not human.
To live is a great answer. The great film director Louis Buñuel said, "Long live the living."
Yes.
Bill? What's your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
Reading.
Did you grow up a reader because your parents were reading? They told you to read, or on your own?
No, both my parents were great readers. They read to me and my two brothers every night before bed. We were surrounded with books. My mother was an elementary school teacher. She taught me to read before I went to first grade. Just reading was built into my DNA, I suppose.
Well, dude, you anticipated some upcoming questions. You must have ESP. Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Well, it helps them to survive, to get a better life. I mean, I suppose with the early hunter-gatherers, where they could get the best food sources, sharing that knowledge.
Yeah. And do you think this need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented?
I would go more with innate. Some of both, but
yeah. Do thoughts create emotions?
That's a question I've never even considered before. Do thoughts create emotions? That's what I'll have to think about. I mean, my first reaction is thoughts may be emotions.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to come up with a definition between thoughts and emotions that would make them two totally different things. But I think there's an intermixture of the two there.
Yeah, I agree. I think feeling and thinking, you can't separate them. But since we invented the words, we think we can separate them and say they're two different things.
Right.
Is thinking more innate or more invented?
I think thinking is more innate. It's what has enabled us to do all that we've done, although we've done a lot of bad things. But yeah, I guess all creatures think to their own limitations with their own bodily apparatus.
Right. Fill in the blank, Bill. I don't know what I think until I'm
more of an intuitive feeling person, so I feel something first before I think about it.
Right. Can humans think without language?
I would think so. I can't see why they might be a different level of thinking, but I think they could. I mean, people before they had language were thinking about how they were going to get something to eat that day. And
Yeah. Chomsky says a language is not just words. It's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. Bill, what do you do when language doesn't work, when language breaks down?
you kill each other.
But I mean, you're saying people kill each other, but what do you do
Oh,
as an individual? What strategy?
I mean, so I'm trying to communicate something to someone and I can't.
Yeah, and the language breaks down either from their failings, your failings, or the circumstantial failings.
The one thing I've learned is that the most important thing to me in communication is a definition of terms. I find too often when communication breaks down or fails, it comes from the fact that people are talking about apples and oranges as though they were the same thing. And I always, before I get into any kind of serious discussion with somebody, I always say, let's define our terms. What do we mean by this? What do we mean by that? And if we can't agree on a definition, then there's no way we can communicate.
Yeah.
So,
Your observations of humans in general, I know it's both and it depends. Are humans more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
they're more feeling.
Yeah. Two questions from Alan Turing in 1950. Is thinking a function of the soul?
What is the soul?
You're answering a question with a question, Bill. You
Well,
win.
no, I'm trying to define the terms.
Right, right. No, I know. I'm just
We don't
joking.
agree on what it is.
Right.
See,
I'm just joking.
I don't believe there is such a thing as a soul. So, and if you do, then we're not going to reach any consensus.
Right. No, I was just joking around because I'm saying a lot of people answer that question with what is a soul. And then there's this general philosophy. We could look it up in etymology, the etymological roots, or we could look up in the dictionary and then people say, but I'm saying you answering a question with a question is what this series is all about, is we're trying to invent new questions. So yeah, I mean, generally, that's a new question I've been asking recently. And 80% of people go, it depends on what you mean by the soul. So, some people are more certain. They go, well, I think I know what the soul is. And they use this word spirit. And they go, well, it's like spirit. So the other Turing question is, can machines think?
Let's define the word think.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, in certain definitions of think, yes, they can.
Yeah. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Well, I pursue happiness. I think the Dalai Lama said that the the meaning of life is happiness. He said that's the easy thing to answer. The real question becomes what makes happiness.
Yeah,
whether that's a new car or helping somebody that's down on their luck. There are all kinds of answers to that question. But,
yeah. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we actually creating it?
from what I've read of studies, the whole question of human consciousness is something nobody's been able to pin down or know where it comes from or what it is. So I just don't. I don't think anybody knows what consciousness is or whatever
Right.
we call it.
Right. Is what's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Ah, huh. Well, supposedly nothing is faster than the speed of light. So um, I don't know how you measure the speed of thought.
Yeah.
So I'd have to have a measure for it so I could tell how fast it was going.
Right. So Audre Lorde, the poet, said you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer said you can if you expose the tools. The question is basically, what new tool do you suggest? And just to put it into context, Bill, I opened some of the questions with cute quotes. It's not that you have to apply the quote to the question. That's your choice. You put it into the context you want. And in this regard, it's more like what tool do you gravitate towards? But if you want to apply it in dismantling the master's house, that's fine. And if you want to use the word new, that's fine too.
So what is the question?
What new tool do you uh, suggest or slash gravitate towards? What tool attracts you?
Well, I think the World Wide Web is a tool that
Yeah.
most of us gravitate to these days.
Yeah.
Everything that everything we've got is out there somewhere.
What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
I don't worry about anything anytime.
That's good. Marcia McLuhan.
If you can do something about something, do it. If you can't do anything about it, then why worry about it?
Yeah. What's the difference between worry and concern?
Hmm. Well, I see. I might define it with worry being a little more extreme form of concern.
Yeah. Marcia McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions so that we can learn to cope with what we don't like about them. So, like you brought up the web, there's hidden psychic effects of how the web has affected humans. We know the obvious sort of effects, but there's deeper effects too. Sometimes they're called unintended consequences, or just there's just things we're not so aware of. So, Bill, I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do humans ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though artists are broadcasting them to us?
Well, Oscar Wilde said that life imitates art. And somebody said that art doesn't teach us anything except to see things in a new way. Uh, I don't. I don't know. It's an interesting question.
Yeah. Do you think artists have a moral obligation?
I think we all have a moral obligation, but I think artists are better able to express it than non-artists, and I think that gives them even more responsibility to use their art in that way.
Yeah. Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
Well, there's some good old ideas and old and old. I mean, there's good and bad old ideas and good and bad new ideas. But I like new ideas. I mean, I always like to look for something new.
Beautiful. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
The earliest memory I can recall, and I would have been about 2 years old. I was standing in my maternal grandmother's kitchen, and I asked her for a glass of water. And she reached up to the cabinet. I saw her. She took the glass out. She filled it with water. She handed it to me. And before I could raise it to my lips, she said, "What do you say?" And I said, "Thank you." That's the whole memory. But it's
That's
so vivid. I could see every detail of the kitchen. I know it just, and that's as far back as I can recall.
that's beautiful. What city was that or town?
That was a town called Bowling Green, Florida. As I tell people, because nobody knows where Bowling Green, Florida is, and it's halfway between Wauchula and Fort Meade. It's in the south central part of Florida where no tourists or any people go. Just a little town.
Do you think memory is more a curse or more a blessing?
Oh, more a blessing.
Yeah. Tell me someone within your immediate family and then outside your immediate family who had an impact on you. Just briefly, what was that impact? Like a role model?
Well, within the family, my mother was certainly a very strong influence on me. I learned a lot of just great life lessons from her, and she was always a very happy, cheerful person. Lived to 99 and happy right up to the end. Um, as far as outside of the family, I spent my whole life as an educator. Started out as a teacher, and then most of my career as a educational administrator. And I had the opportunity when I was working at the University of Florida for 2 years as coordinator of a federal early childhood grant to go spend the month of October in Aspen, Colorado with Sylvia Ashton Warner, who is very famous and was very famous in early childhood circles, New Zealander who wrote the book Teacher, and her method of that she developed to teach the Maori natives. She taught reading, and she probably had more influence on me in education than anyone else. Just a remarkable woman.
Beautiful. Tell me her name once more. Sylvia?
Sylvia, and then it's hyphenated Ashton Warner.
Thank you. Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
Yes, I was raised in the Methodist Church.
And did you ever check out or are you still practicing?
I'm in the First Church of Nihilism now.
What age did you check out about?
Oh, not until probably in my 50s or so. I always had doubts. I always had concerns that I just kind of pushed to the back burner. I mean, I did the coursework to become certified as a lay speaker in the United Methodist Church. I was able to conduct the liturgy and preach and do everything the preacher did except give communion. Um, but then suddenly one day, I guess some people would call it a crisis of faith or whatever, but suddenly one day it just no longer made any sense to me. And as I began reading more of quantum physics and uh, what the world is probably like, I started looking into Nietzsche and to nihilism, and I use the philosophical definition of it is that nothing exists.
Nothing exists. Yeah.
Nothing, no material reality. Tom Robbins, great novelist, he was I trying to think of what he said? He said that human life is slowed down light, and physical reality, the weird dance of electrified nothingness. And when you look in quantum physics and they keep going back, they keep splitting all of these subatomic particles and they keep getting more and more. I think as a novelist, he said eventually it's just going to be electrified nothingness there, that there really is nothing. Sir James Jeans, a physicist, said that the universe is becoming to look more like a great idea than a great physical body. So
that was who said the great idea line?
I think it was Sir James. Was it Sir James Jeans? He was an English physicist. Jeans, I think.
That's good.
I could get it for you, but
no, that's good. I love your books because they're layered with so many brilliant quotes. And back to Tom Robbins for a second. I've talked to Tom a little, and I really want to do this interview with him someday. But he's obsessed with both McLuhan and Finnegan's Wake.
Oh yeah. Well, his novel "Fierce Invalids Home from Hot Climates" has Finnegan's Wake all in it.
All in it.
And I, in fact, you probably saw in my book with my 5 chapters on the 5 sentences on the first page of Finnegan's Wake, I use a quote from Tom Robbins' book, and my favorite one is the first one is that his last day in Bangkok was spent in deep meditation at a Buddhist shrine. Though in balance, it should be reported that he spent the evening prior addressing the CRFT club for 40 minutes on the first page, on the first sentence of Finnegan's Wake, that being the only sentence of the book he'd ever read.
Yeah.
And at the end of that chapter, I say, everybody thinks that's a funny thing to say, but now you realize you really can talk for 40 minutes on the first sentence of Finnegan's Wake.
It's very, very accurate. Yeah, it's beautiful. I had a friend who was raised by, educated East Coast parents, and he'd come home from college, and they would catch him at a party, a house party, and the mom would say, "I don't want you hanging out in the bathroom reading Finnegan's Wake." Because he would just find solace like that.
Yeah.
But it is beautiful what Tom's done, and that quote is amazing.
I just I guess the first book I found was Even Cowgirls Get the Blues, and after that, as soon as one came out, I ran out and got it.
We're going to get more into the Wake and Joyce and literature, but just to follow the script a little, do you pray?
Yeah, I must admit that I do it, and I think it's, and I always ask myself why, since I don't believe that there's a higher power, but I guess it's just something that's been ingrained in me that if there's a situation that I need help with, I will say, please let me finish this trip safely without a wreck or something like that.
Yeah.
It's someone kind of compared it to what is that kind of pseudomedicine where you take a little bit of the opposite
placebo?
No, it's for instance, if you've got a certain condition and
homeopathic,
something like that, and they compare prayer to like that. Well, you take a little bit, even though you don't think it's going to help, but you do it anyway.
It's homeopathy does that. Yeah,
Yeah,
they give you a little dosage, then you build your immune system up. Yeah.
right. Yeah.
So, if God does exist, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
Um, sleep well.
Nice.
I see death as a deep, dreamless sleep.
Yeah.
Nothing, and that's, I mean, the worst thing would be to die and to have nightmares.
Can you forget to die?
What was that poem? Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. So, yeah, I think most people live by pushing the thought of death to a back burner. I mean, they know that's going to happen, but they don't live with that consciously.
Bill, do evil people exist or does evil use people as a vehicle?
That would be personifying evil. I don't know that I could go that far. And again, definition of terms, what is evil? To one person, something is evil, and to another, it's perfectly fine. So, um, I mean, you look at all the different societies we have in this world, and, there's just great disagreement on on what's good and what's evil.
That's right.
Wearing for a woman to wear white shoes between Labor Day and Memorial Day is, for some people, is terrible.
Yeah. So just to follow up on that, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'm going to set it up with a few modern thinkers' thoughts. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And, and Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. A basic question, Bill, is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to the Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
I'm not sure what he means by acknowledge them, whether you're acknowledging them as an enemy or not. I I saw an administration, and I would tell people, um, your enemies will stab you in the back, your friends will stab you in the chest. And we used to say there's a superintendent behind every pair of eyes. Whatever job you were in on the rung, the ladder within the school system, there was somebody beneath you that wanted your job. And you might think, they were the best friend in the world. Um, and they were until they had an opportunity to get your job. And then the knife comes in the chest. So I just live with the possibility that everybody is a potential enemy, and just don't relax your guard.
Don't relax your guard. You are a smart man. You're good with words. I appreciate this. So James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin, Volta Cinema, over 100 years ago. He basically checked out, said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, Falk said some fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Well, playwrights can put things into words or screenwriters that we wouldn't be able to do ourselves. It can reveal things to us that open our perceptions on the world, can see how other people operate and believe. I loved movies as a child, and some of them had a very profound effect on me. I was in fifth grade. Once a month, you could go to the auditorium if you paid a dime to see a movie, and they showed. It was back from the 1940s, so it was an old movie then. A Song to Remember with Cornel Wilde playing Frédéric Chopin, and there's a scene towards the end where he's giving a concert to help the Polish freedom fighters fighting against Russia, and he's dying of tuberculosis and he's coughing, and all of a sudden one bright red drop of blood falls on a white piano key. And I remember just being electrified by that. I mean, it was just very moving to me.
But what was the significance? What did it symbolize to you? Or how did it work in telling you a story that touched you personally?
It was his great love for his country, and even though he was dying, that he was still doing what he could to help it.
Yeah.
That was important. I remember seeing the Hollywood version of War and Peace, I guess back in the early 50s. And I remember on the retreat from Moscow, one of the Russian soldiers walks over to a carriage that's kind of leaning over there in the snow, and he opens the door, and this beautiful woman and beautiful gown and everything falls out dead in the snow, frozen to death. And, again, that was very striking to me. I mean, it really, that one scene just showed what that whole retreat from Moscow was like. And as an adult, I went on and just read everything I could about Napoleon's invasion of Moscow.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get into movies more. You ever see Abel Gance's Napoleon movie, 3 screens?
No.
Yeah. Anyways, we'll get into movies more. That was good. So let's talk about your career a little, about becoming an educator and then deciding to write books. I'm sort of after a little of the history, just briefly, what you studied in college, what were you aspiring to do? And what was the tipping point when you said, well, I want to be an educator, I want to be a teacher? And when did you have that same tipping point in literature or being an author? You said, I'm reading books. Now I can do this. When did you start writing? And then when did you say, I want to kick this over to being my career?
I was in 6th grade, Mrs. Horsemeyer's room, and I remember sitting there one day. We had been studying ancient Rome, and she had given us a very vivid description of Mount Vesuvius and Pompeii being covered and all. And I remember sitting there and saying to myself, I want to write a book. Nobody had ever encouraged me to write a book. I didn't know anybody who had written a book. And I thought I could write a book about brother and sister my age who are in Pompeii when Vesuvius erupts, and how they survive and get out of there. And I wrote a paragraph or two, and then I realized the only Roman name I knew was Julius Caesar, so I didn't know what to call these people. I couldn't call them Tom or Sally. And so I shut down and didn't do anything. But in my mind, from that moment on, I knew I wanted to write. And most of the writer friends that I have, I've found early on in their life, they knew they wanted to write, even though it was many years later before they ever did that. So.
Very interesting. A screenwriting teacher told me that a great film or a great book is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Stanley Kubrick says the opposite. Great film or great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process?
Well, it's different for fiction and nonfiction. I mean, when I write nonfiction, I have an intention clearly set out, uh, and I have a structure and outline that I work from. When I'm writing fiction, uh, and I know this this sounds strange to people, and I don't think people believe me when I say it, but a character comes into my head and says, "Would you like to hear my story?" And I say, "Okay." And they tell me who they are and just the basic idea, and I just write down what they tell me. And every time I finish, and next time I sit down, I'm there, and the voice comes again, and I just write it down. I have no idea where it's going, what's going to happen, or anything. So,
Is that a verb to describe that called channeling? What's the verb?
yeah, channeling would be a good word
Yeah,
for it. Yeah, yeah. There's the person comes from outside somewhere.
yeah.
I think of it inhabiting my brain because they'll use things that I know that are up there in my brain, but they tell me a story that I don't know anything about. So,
Then Marcel Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much do you think of your audience when you're writing your book?
I don't. Um, Gertrude Stein said, "I write for myself and others," and I feel kind of the same way. I write for myself, and if others want to read it, I'm delighted. But it's I don't know. It's like a therapy for me. I mean, I found early on that I'm happiest when I'm writing, and so
Yeah, I have this thing when I talk to students, get your life and your job as mixed up as possible. So you don't consider writing your job, you consider it more your way of life or a way to be happy.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
no. Well, I mean, how many writers can live off of writing? I mean, that's it's about like actors or singers or whatever. I mean, most of them are waiting tables trying to get a break somewhere.
Right.
It's
Yeah, the arts, pursuing the arts is the old parental concern. Do you have a job to fall back on?
yes, yeah, yeah. It's but you know, people can write, they can paint, they can do all kinds of things while they're doing other work to bring
Yeah.
in money.
McLuhan said everything we invent extends some humanness. So clothing extends our skin, knife and fork extends our teeth. The shutter in a camera or projectors might be an extension of our eyelid. Non tangible things like religion or philosophy might be an extension of consciousness. What does the writing utensil extend for you? What humanness, whether it's a keyboard or a pen, what humanness does the writing utensil extend for you?
Ask me that one more time. What? What?
What humanness or It's sort of like if you think of the knife and fork extending the teeth, what humanness is the writing utensil extending?
I suppose the brain and
Yeah. Okay. I spoke with this filmmaker, Michael Apted. He did 28 and Up and Coal Miner's Daughter 40 years ago. And this is when MTV was starting. I said, why do rock video editors feel so obliged to edit fast? Most people don't know Abel Gance in France pretty much invented rapid montage in 1922, but it really flourished in the 80s with MTV. And now we're bombarded with it in TV commercials, this fast editing pace. He said to me, because we've learned to take in information faster. I asked this question with a bias. Can we literally learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
I think we can take it in faster, depending on the information. I know there are people that will uh, have a lecture, say, and turn the speed up where they can hear it in a faster period of time and still process all the information, as long as it's not too fast. I think, you know, given that there are limits, but I think we can process things faster.
Yeah, because some say Evelyn Green's speed reading, whenever that came out many years ago, that it did work, and some people say it didn't work. But Bill, really the hidden question there is, can humans literally multitask?
Well, according to my understanding of multitasking, yes, you can do several things at once. Now, whether you do them as well than as if you did each one separately, that's another question.
Yeah. What was the motive of the cave artist? Not what, some anthropologist said or you read in a book or a movie. Your hunch, what was the motive of the cave artist?
Well, since a lot of that cave art has to do with hunting animals, it, it could be a kind of a quasi-religious thing of trying to picture the hunt and them with their spears and bringing down an animal. Or it could be just that there's an instinctive, innate human desire for the arts. I know in one of the caves in France, they found a flute made from an animal bone with holes in it, which you can play today. So people who were creating music, when you look at some of that art, I mean, they actually use the indentations in the wall. Like one was a bison, and there was a part where the rock kind of jutted out, and they used that as the body to give a three-dimensional effect to it. Um, so, um, in jewelry, I mean, that goes way back in history. People came up with things to decorate their bodies. It just seemed to be something you look at societies all over the world, and painting and music and dance and all of that is there in some form or another.
Thanks, Bill. And what first attracted you to pursue Finnegan's Wake in particular? Maybe your history of Joyce as being like art in high school or college, and then what gravitated you towards Finnegan's Wake?
Well, my middle brother, he was the smartest of the three of us, and when he left home to go to college, and he left his library behind there, and he had a copy of Ulysses and a copy of Finnegan's Wake, and I didn't know anything about either one of them, and I was teaching a school then, and I read somewhere that no one can be considered properly educated without having read at least one page of Finnegan's Wake. Well, that came later. First, I read that the three greatest novels were Tolstoy's War and Peace, Proust's Remembrance of Things Past, and Joyce's Ulysses. Well, I'd read War and Peace. That was one of the first things I read once I got out of college. Proust I'd never heard of, but Johnny's copy of Ulysses was there, so I took it down and started trying to read it, and I didn't get very far. I tried several more times and didn't get very far. But eventually, I got a reader's guide to it, and I'd take it chapter by chapter. So I ended up reading it, and then after that, I read that you had to read one page of Finnegan's Wake to be considered properly educated. So I took that book down and I read the first page, and not knowing anything about it, not having any clue or anybody that ever knew anything about it, and I started trying to figure it out. And I'd had 4 years of Latin in high school, and so commodius vicus and some of those things looked like Latin, and I just started trying to see if I could decipher it. Of course, I didn't get very far. And then one day, looking at some used books outside a bookstore, I found Campbell Robinson's A Skeleton Key to Finnegan's Wake. And I thought, oh, okay. So I read the beginning of that, where they dissect the first, so how many paragraphs, and I said, oh, okay, now I see how this works. There is a method in the madness here. And from that point on, I just, I would be driving down the road and I'd be thinking of a certain term there, and I'd try and come up with a meaning for it. And I started making little notes and putting them in a drawer for years. And it wasn't until I retired that I decided to do this first book on the first page. I always had in mind that I wanted to do that someday, but I didn't have the time until then. So,
right. So this is your first book on the Wake, and this is your second.
Yes.
Yeah. They're really amazing books. I really appreciate them. And did you ever read Finnegan's Wake out loud with a group of people?
No. No, never did.
You've always read it silently to yourself?
I've read it silent to myself, but I've listened to recordings of it.
Yeah. And Bill, how much of the Wake do you think you get, just in general, the word get, understand, and how much do you think Joyce got, from 0 to 100%? Just a general hunch or guess.
Well, Joyce famously said that he said there's only one person right now, and that's myself, who understands everything in this book. But in a couple of years, I don't know that I will even know everything that's in it anymore. So,
but in general, would you say Joyce got the Wake 100%, 80%, overall?
100%.
100%. What? How much do you get? What would you put your?
Oh Lord, maybe 1%.
1%. Wow.
With the first page, I'd say probably I got up to over 50% better. But once you leave the first page, there's a lot of it that just goes over my head that I've not studied that deeply.
Do you continue to read The Wake?
No. I spent, after I retired, I started accumulating a library of all the books, everything that was out there on The Wake.
Oh, you have the library of Roland McHugh. How
Oh,
many books? How many books do you have on Joyce and The Wake about?
Lord, I had 4 long shelves of books at my former home. I was in Gainesville then, University of Florida. Um, I don't know how many books I had. I mean, I had Sherlock Holmes and Finnegan's Wake and Opera and Finnegan's Wake, and I German.
Right.
I had everything, uh, and I
And
spent
you pretty much read them all?
yeah, yeah, and I made notes. I mean, I had thousands of note cards, and I would just put them in a drawer, and um, anything that related to the first page was what I was looking for. And
Oh, I see. First page was your specialty. But in all that research in Finnegan's Wake, what are your 3 favorite scholars or books about the Wake? Is there 3 that sort of stand out?
to me, John Bishop's
Very good.
what is John Bishop's book? Joyce's
Book
Book in the Dark.
Book
Uh,
of the Dark, yeah.
I think that's probably one of the greatest books out there.
Yeah, all these questions I asked you, I asked John once.
Mm-hmm.
So I was lucky.
Yeah.
And what's the other 2 you would say besides John?
Um, well, it's not a book I guess you actually sit and read so much, but McHugh's annotations to
Yeah,
Finnegan's Wake is indispensable for
yeah,
anybody to study the Wake.
yep.
Uh, so that was another big. I mean, I remember when I first discovered that book and got a copy, it was like, somebody had given me the keys to heaven. It
It's
was,
like gold.
oh, it was wonderful. Um, let's see, there were so many. Um, is it John Gordon's the plot of Finnegan's Wake?
John Gordon's good too, yeah.
Yeah, that was an excellent one. But for about 5 years, I've always been a great reader and read widely on all that thing. But for 5 years, I allowed myself to read nothing except related to Finnegan's Wake, and I made notes. And then I got River Run to Livy. I finally sat down one day and said, "Look, you can take notes the rest of your life. You got to write this book someday." So I started writing with what I had, and then I kept adding to it, and finally got it together. And I started sending it out first to all the university presses that had ever published anything on James Joyce, and then I started sending to every commercial publisher that had done anything on Joyce. And I spent 2 years doing that, collecting rejection slips. And so in those 2 years, that's when I wrote the lectionary, because I had all that information. So, 7 years, I was just totally immersed in Finnegan's Wake, and I don't like the term burnout that people talk about, but I finally just had all. I could either go on the rest of my life because it would never stop. I could keep adding to my knowledge and information, but I wanted to get into reading other things, and I wanted to write fiction, which I find exciting and fun. That's enjoyable. Nonfiction is more work.
Bill, that was good. And just one more question about the Wake. Maybe we'll dabble in a little, but or related to the Wake. I mean, what other authors or book titles after The Wake that you find most had an impact on you? Like The Wake made an impact on you. You spent 7 years and you created 2 amazing books that are very helpful to Wake people who study The Wake. I find your books very helpful because they're not overly academic. They're down to earth. And I'm just curious, like maybe 2 other authors or book titles that have had or have an impact on you.
Marcel Proust, The Remembrance of Things Past. I remember when I heard about great things about it, and so I started it, and 7 volumes of several thousand pages, and I got totally caught up in that, and then started reading everything on Proust that I could find. So that I loved his style, and War and Peace had a great impact on me too. I was just starting teaching then. I was 21, and that was the first serious thing I'd read outside of college, and I just felt like I was living right there with all of this cast of characters, and I just remember being so sad when it ended because I just wanted it to go on.
Right.
That was a big impact. I don't know whether you know Lawrence Durrell's The Alexandria Quartet, but it's 4 books, each told by a different person in Alexandria, Egypt, and the style again is so great in those. And I read the first book and I said, okay, I understand what's going on with these characters. And then you read the second book and you realize, oh no, I didn't really understand it all. There's more to this than the first book told me. And I read the third one and I said, no, no, it's not exactly like the first 2 books said. And then you read the fourth and you find out there's other pieces of the puzzle that were missing. And you finish the fourth and then you begin to wonder, do you really know anything at all or not? But it's a beautiful book, it's a set of books.
What's the spelling of Lawrence's last name?
Durrell, Durrell, I believe.
Oh, Durrell. Yeah, I know that guy. So let's go into poetry for a second, but in general, it's fiction and nonfiction, or let's say fiction writing and poetry. These questions. What is the function of fiction? What's the function? I want to say poetry, but let's just say, what is the function of fiction?
Is to tell a good story.
Yeah.
That just something that engages you, gives you insight into how other people think and live. It just transports you to a different world.
Because T.S. Eliot said that poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
I'm not quite sure what he means by inner dialogue. I mean,
well, it's sort of like your what form is your inner consciousness in?
I have no idea. I don't even know how to think about it.
Right. That's all right. Well, this was funny because we go to a Dante Sweeney's in Dublin, and the gentleman who runs it's a poet, very good. And I said, "What form is your inner dialogue in?" No, and actually, it goes along with what he says. What is the pencil or the writing utensil extend? And he said, tears. So, you know, it's sort of like there's something in us that we get out through books, through writing books. It's sort of maybe this question works. Two of my film heroes say, ignore yourself. There is no self-expression. Great jazz pianist Cecil Taylor says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. So is writing, art making, more self-expression, or more you're a vehicle for whatever technology, culture, or environment is present?
I think with me, it's a good bit of both.
Yeah.
Mixed together. You mentioned poetry a minute ago. I was thinking books and author that have the greatest impacts on me is in my 12th grade senior English class. We were doing a survey of English literature, and when we got to Lord Byron, and I read some lines of his, and it was just like this electric current went through me. It was reading some lines from Childe Harold's Pilgrimage, and I remember going out to the public library and found one that had a copy of it, so I could get it. It was rather over my head at that time, but I went on to read all of Byron and all of his life, and I think he's his Don Juan, the English pronounce it Juan, is the greatest comic epic poem ever written, over thousands of lines. And let's see if I have it here. Yeah. So I've read it many times. It's an amazingly modern book. You just laugh out loud as you read lines like he learned the arts of riding, fencing, gunnery, and how to scale a fortress or a nunnery, things like that. So I sat down and I brought it up to date. The first volume is Don Juan in high school, Lord Byron updated, and then I wrote the second one here, Don Juan abroad, and I took the story and it's all in poetry, just the same form that Byron did, and brought it into the modern age. And what Byron did was very interesting. There's the old legend in Spanish literature of Don Juan, who's a great womanizer and seducer of women. But Byron made Don Juan a 16-year-old boy who was seduced by his mother's best friend. And there begins a whole series of amorous adventures. And we shocked Europe at the time. I mean, it was just scandalized. Shelley visited Byron in Venice and read the first two cantos, and he said, no one has ever written anything like this. But, that book, I can just pick it up and open anywhere and just start reading. And it's such great fun. And I wish I could have. If I could meet anybody, I'd like to meet Lord Byron. He was
Lord Byron. Wow.
Well,
thank you for telling me about that. And you brought up a lot. I just wanted to finish on this idea of the writer being a vehicle or self-expression. Can art making or writing be egoless?
Not for me, I don't think. It's just too much of me involved in it.
So we're going to touch on. comedy too. Okay, go ahead. Did you want to say something else?
I would like to get a drink of water. I had a glass of water sitting
Oh,
here
yeah.
at 3:30 when I thought I was on the right time, and then
Oh,
when I
yeah. Good.
ran in here and I forgot to bring it back again.
Yeah, get your water because I'll show people this book while you're waiting. A Finnegan's Wake Lectionary. Let James Joyce jazz up your vocabulary. Really amazing book. If you're a beginner to Finnegan's Wake or you want to learn more about Finnegan's Wake. The other book is River Run to Liffey. So, Bill, this is really fun and you really get what we're doing. So, just to stay on poetry for a second and then we'll get into comedy a little. You know, Gary Snyder, the nature poet, beat poet, said, "My task as a poet entails the work of seeing the world without language and then bringing that seeing into language." How does that, any thoughts on that idea from Gary?
I would agree completely.
Yeah. Louis Bersani just died and he did a study of Mallarmé, great symbolist poet. And he said the very crises which threatens the writing of poetry sustains poetic composition. So, in your pursuit of a writer, I'm curious whether it's poetry or fiction, the very crises we could reword it. The very crises which threatens the writing of fiction sustains fictional composition. Any thoughts on that idea?
Hmm. A little complex for me, I think. I'm not quite sure.
It's sort of like, again, this thing about motives, intention. How much are these people vehicles for, Joyce said, I didn't write Finnegan's Wake, those people over there. So, my friend says, oh, Finnegan's Wake is like Joyce listening to shortwave radio in Paris in the 20s and writing it all down, you know.
Well,
So,
he did borrow from everybody around him. I mean, he was famous for that, but of course, he had to organize it, put it all together.
right. And he was inspired by Lawrence Stern, Tristram Shandy, and he's inspired by Vico and Bruno and Shakespeare and the Bible and the ritual in his church. It's sort of like Marcel Duchamp again. The artists of the future will only have to point. So it's like, what are you pointing at? Like you going, well, I've got all these books on the wake. Which one am I going to point at and say, I like this idea and I want to condense it and put it into another book so people can get it?
That was my whole purpose. Was as I read everything I was reading about Finnegan's Wake was really written by scholars for scholars.
Yeah.
They weren't written for the average reader. And Joyce really believed that the average reader could read Finnegan's Wake and could get something from it. And so that's what I wanted to do, was to just take one page and show how it worked. And that's why I call it lots of fun, because I put in lots of, some people have criticized it for puns and stupid jokes and stuff like that, but that's what I wanted, was to just have crazy funny things in there to make people smile and groan and have fun with it.
Yeah, have fun with Finnegan's Wake. It's McLuhan's greatest quote about Joyce is the paradoxical exuberance. Joyce uses the pun as a paradoxical exuberance of being through language. That there's a paradox in this exuberance of just being a human being, and we can have fun with the pun. So your roots in comedy and comical humor. First question is, what's the function of laughter?
The function of laughter. You're breaking up on me. I can't.
What is the function of laughter?
Oh, I think it's a release of emotion for us. It's something that makes us feel good. It's a healing mechanism in the body. I mean, people love to laugh. I mean, it's been said everybody in the world would like to be a stand-up comedian. I mean, what greater power
Yeah.
than to stand in front of a group of people and make them laugh?
Yeah, Gurdjieff said a laughter is the reconciliation of yes and no.
Mm.
I'm reviewing the new George Carlin documentary now. It's 4 hours, and it really delves deep into, his whole approach was the role of the comedian is to draw a line and then cross it.
Yeah.
And so you sort of said Lord Byron was someone who had an impact to you in regards to humor. Who else, whether it's radio, movies, books, besides Lord Byron and Joyce, say, who had an impact on you for your sense of humor?
Well, I kind of like Woody Allen's movie Radio Days. I was
Yeah.
born in '44, so I grew up listening to the radio. And the big night in my family was just my parents and me would sit Sunday evening and we would listen to Jack Benny. And,
Yes.
and then there was the um, Charlie McCarthy show, Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy. Uh, and I just thought those were the funniest things in the world. Jack Benny going down to his vault and, you know, didn't seem strange to me that a ventriloquist would be on radio where you couldn't see whether his lips moved or not. But uh, that was, I guess, my first real introduction to humor. Um, and we didn't have television or I mean, as kids we had knock jokes and things like little jokes that we would tell, but there wasn't a lot of humor out there like there is today.
Well, I like you quote Peter Ustinov in your book, and it says you say comedy is simply a funny way of being serious.
Yeah.
So that's something I've learned from Frank Zappa studying him is how to embrace contradiction.
Mhm.
And I'm curious, what's more important, conviction or compromise?
I think as long as we live in society with other people, compromise is vital. I think that's one of the terrible things in our Congress today is that there's doesn't seem to be any compromise anymore. It's either you've got to do it my way or else. And when my grandfather Cliett was in the Florida Senate, and I grew up hearing stories about politics and things that happened up there. And the one lesson I took away from all of that was that politics is the art of compromise. But I think it's part of. I mean, it's part of a marriage. You need compromise to have a good marriage. You need compromise to do lots of things in this world.
Bill, there's no right or wrong answers to any of these questions, but that one you got right. Thank you. Is perception reality?
No, and it comes down to what is reality is that when we talked about quantum physics is when you get down to the very bottom of things is there may be nothing there at all. Uh, what we perceive in our everyday world has, nothing to do with the reality underlying it. Uh, so, um,
That was good. Evoked Lily Tomlin said reality's just a collective hunch.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's about it. What we take for real is, I mean, we know that a solid surface, that, that a door, I mean, well, any material objects around us are, there's more empty space in it than there is anything solid. But it's only the fact that those subatomic particles are moving so quickly that it gives the appearance of solidity. But actually, it's mainly just empty space.
Yeah.
But you know,
Well, I want to jump back to politics for 1 second because Eric McLuhan points out that the word fact and the word fake both come from the Latin word to make.
oh,
So it's interesting. Utah Phillips, activist and folk singer, said anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people. Who's entitled to make the rules?
well, every society has had some kind of leadership and has to bestow powers in making decisions on people. Whether it's a tribal leader that's elected by the little group, or what we have today in this country, or whether it's the strongest man takes over and makes the rules. And I mean, generally, the golden rule is, he who has the gold makes the rules. So just it varies with every. There are a lot of things we see now that the people that actually hold a leadership title are not the ones with any real power. It's people behind the scenes that we don't see.
Right.
And in America today, big corporations pull a lot of the strings.
Emperor's wearing no clothing. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. The Wizard of Us.
Yes.
So Lewis Carroll said, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
Well, actually, I can't remember, it was the Red Queen or the White Queen who said that, because
You're right.
Alice told her, she said, you can't believe that. That's impossible. And she said, well, you obviously haven't had it, you don't have it practiced. She said, when I was your age, I believed 6 impossible things before breakfast. Well, I would, of course, again, definition, what is impossible? I mean, I believed in 4th grade, because my teacher told us that man could never get to the moon because the force of gravity was too strong for us to escape it. And so, my teacher told me that, and I believed it. And some people came along later and they didn't believe it. They were on the moon. So, I think there are a lot of impossible things we believe. I mean, who would have believed that we could be sitting here looking at each other across the whole continent? And
well, Bill, it's funny because we're on live TV worldwide, but this is television TV, basically. It's 1939. This was first displayed in the New York World's Fair, the year Finnegan's Wake came out. Then 1968, we see it as a reality in a fictional movie called 2001. And, you see television TV or Zoom or whatever you want to call it. And now it's like a normal thing. But the thing about impossibility is summarized well by the jazz shaman Sunrise. Said, the impossible attracts me because everything possible has been done and the world didn't change.
That's good.
Tell me one major element of your creativeness, your dedication to learning and teaching and writing that's changed and one major element that stayed the same in the years you've pursued it?
Hmm. It's difficult. I think I've finally learned that you can't really teach anybody anything. They have to be willing to learn. Uh, and my fifth grade teacher would say, if I could drill a hole in the top of your head and pour the knowledge in, I would do it. But you can't. Um, oh, I don't know of another thing right offhand.
Well, Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
Well, I don't know that I was ever really taught to write or had any writing skills. We didn't. In Florida now we have state writing test, and I mean it's really taught. But back when I was growing up, I don't ever remember until high school having to actually write anything. Uh, so I didn't really. I knew I wanted to be a writer, but I really didn't know how to. And so I early on started. I subscribed to Writer's Digest magazine and read the articles there, and just started trying to write little things, and just kind of writer can't ever say whether what he does is good or bad. That's for the reader to decide. But I could feel my strength growing as I worked more and more at it and read some of the important things that you need to.
Yeah, no, I think you've succeeded, Bill. Your wake books are great. Anger can be a productive emotion when fill in the blank.
Well, I think when you want to make a point that's important to you. I mean, sometimes you you have to get angry or raise your voice to show that this is important, that you're not going to go beyond that.
There's a line that goes like this: you create what you resist. The comedian Bob Goldthwait morphed it into you are what you hate. James Joyce said, it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve. And Louis Buñuel nailed it. Thank God I'm an atheist. So this idea, I'm not saying you, but one creates what one resists. You create what you resist. Any thoughts on that idea?
It's strange. You create what you resist. um, I'm not sure I really believe that or quite comprehend it, maybe.
Yeah. How do you find peace of mind?
Oh, right now I'm staring at the ocean, watching the waves roll in.
That is a beautiful way to. I think staring at water is one of the most amazing things.
Water,
Staring at water, yeah, it's
yeah,
really calming.
water. Any doesn't matter. Even when I lived in Gainesville, just in the evening, sit out by the swimming pool and read, and just watching the water. And
Yeah.
now I'm fortunate in my final years to be able to see the ocean waves, but I can just sit on the beach for an hour and just stare at it, and it's almost like a form of meditation, I suppose.
It's totally. And so I heard that Joyce was going to write a book after the wake about the ocean. Is that true or the sea? You know about that?
No, I'm trying to remember now. He did talk about another book. Of course, he also said, "Why should I write another book? Nobody reads the last one." Uh, um, yeah, I can't remember what I read about an idea he might have had for another book, but I.
One more Joyce question that's hounding us. You know, D.W. Griffith, the American filmmaker who sort of invented feature films, he said in 1924 that in 2024 cinema will help end warfare. And it's like, dude, that'd be great if we did it now. Why wait 100 years? But it's a high aspiration. And then someone told me that Joyce said Finnegan's Wake can propagate peace and help end war. Have you ever heard Joyce saying anything like that?
Yeah, I think he believed in the power of his writing. He also believed in his powers of prognostication. In the wake, it says that Germany's the place where the gas will really be turned on just before the Second World War. Uh, uh, he predicted Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the atomic bomb. That's all in the wake. Um, so, Sylvia Ashton Warner from New Zealand, she believed that her method of teaching reading could bring world peace because it draws not on outside words teaching kids, but pulling the words that have intense personal meaning from their lives and using that to learn to read. So it's a great dream.
You mean Sylvia Ashton Warren said that her teaching techniques could help propagate peace? Is that what you said?
Right.
Yeah.
Because she said, I reach my hand into the mind of the child and bring out working material. So she based her instructions on what was important and vital to the child rather than starting with outside.
It's beautiful. Bill, we almost have our 90 minutes up. Can you go a few minutes longer, 5 or 10 minutes?
Sure.
Great. So if you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Look out. I guess I'd say you're on your own, kid. You're going to have to figure it out yourself. I'm 77. I don't have the answers. So
good luck. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So these are 5 quick Alan Watts questions just off the top of your head. You put them in the context you want in a few words. Who started it all?
Fluctuation in the time and space continuum.
Nice. That's one of the best answers I've ever had. Are we going to make it?
We're talking about humans. No, I think we're on a path to destruction that will. I think some of us will survive, but I think most of what we've created is going to go by the wayside.
Where do we put it?
Where do we put it?
Yeah.
What is it?
That's good. Again, you're answering a question with a question.
I got that from Socrates.
Yeah, Socrates is that Irish people answer questions with questions, and the guy goes, "We do, eh?" Well, the other great Irish line is this a private fight or can anyone join in?
Well, in Ireland, if it's a wake, everybody has to join in.
Right. Okay, two more quickie Alan Watts questions. Who's cleaning it up?
Nobody on Earth right now, if you look at all the plastic floating around the ocean here, nobody.
Is it serious?
Yes, it is serious.
Okay, a few more. If a publisher was to release your autobiography, Bill, off the top of your head, what would the title be?
Well, I've just written a memoir, my first 11 years uh, from birth to sixth grade. And I've titled it Growing Up in the Middle Class in the Middle of the 20th Century.
Oh, beautiful. And the publisher wants to scent the glue in the binding. What smell?
Sandalwood.
Oh, I like that. Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Good I've never had and never want. Most of the good things I can think about, I want. I can't think of anything good that I don't want.
Should toilet paper come off the roll over or under?
Over.
Why?
There's, I was going to order it and put it in my bathroom as a little print that it shows two rolls of toilet paper, one over, one under, and underneath it, it says the Great Debate. I think it's easier to pull from the top than it is from the bottom.
Yeah. Well, my friend has a picture of the patent. It's 100 years old and it has it going over. But you'd be surprised. 80% of people say over, but a few people say under.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't realize there were that many on my side. Usually I'm in the minority.
If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
I'd say shit.
It's good. Thornton Wilder, who was a Wakean, by the way, that. He said, art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You've laid your cards on the table for over 90 minutes, Bill. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this, but what's it really all about for you?
Life, the universe, and everything. Well, we know that the answer is 42.
What's the story behind that?
That's the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh, he says the answer is 42?
Well, they developed this computer to compute what is the answer to life, the universe, and everything. And after 7 million years, the computer spits out the answer and says it's 42. And everybody goes, what? And the computer says, well, actually, that wasn't really a question. You need to come up with a question first. So they build an Earth-size computer. Earth is a computer in it, and it's to compute the question that the answer 42 goes with, except 5 minutes before the computer is going to give the answer, the Vogon constructor fleet blows Earth up to make room for a space bypass. And so all of that work is lost. But
wow, so they leave you hanging. You never get the question.
Oh, the Irish writer. Joyce really liked him. He wrote the book at what was it at Sea Two Birds.
Yeah.
Anyway, I like it in there because I put it in my book. He says that questions are more important than answers. That
Yeah.
a good question is difficult to answer. A really good question has no answer at all.
Yeah, that's right. And in fact, I have two responses. One is the guy goes up to the guru and says, "What's the best question I can ask you?" And the guru says, "The one you just asked me." But do you know Joseph Campbell's favorite joke?
No.
It's similar. The guy climbs the mountain for days to get to the guru. And he says, something now I'm forgetting it. He says something like, what is, oh, here it is. He goes, "What is the meaning of life?" And the guru goes, "Candle is the meaning of life." And he says, "You mean I climbed up this mountain for 5 days for you to say candle is the meaning of life?" And the guru goes, "Why isn't it?"
Well, you've heard the one about the man that goes up, the monk that goes up to the hot dog vendor in New York and
Oh,
says,
yeah.
"Make me one with everything."
Yes.
Yeah, change comes from within.
Yes.
Well,
Okay.
somebody
We're
said,
almost,
some physicists said that the world is not only stranger than we suppose, it's stranger than we can suppose.
yeah. Yeah, that's good. Well, we're almost done. Couple more. Bill, this has been really fun. I really appreciate it. Thank you for writing your books. What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
There's not much of the cultural shift today that inspires me. I don't know. We seem to be heading to being bogged down in wars again. Politics is pretty dismal. I don't know. I don't feel inspired. Sad to say.
That's all right. The last question is, what gives you the most optimism?
Well, the old thing that the optimist sees the glass as half full and the pessimist sees it as half empty, but the engineer sees it as poorly designed because it will hold twice as much as is necessary. I don't know whether that answers it. But,
That's good. I like that. Bill, thank you so much. This was really fun and enlightening. I hope our discussion never ends, but I'm going to hit the stop button now. It doesn't mean we got to end.
okay. Wait.
Go ahead. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Well, just